The tension in Riyadh that night could almost be felt vibrating through the air. The energy wasn't the usual electric excitement of a WWE main event. It was something different, something darker. Every fan could sense that something was about to happen, something far beyond the scripted chaos they were used to. The massive arena buzzed with a strange anticipation as Roman Reigns made his entrance. His walk down the ramp was deliberate, powerful as always, but his face betrayed a flicker of something beneath the surface. Anger, exhaustion, maybe even fear. This wasn't the confident, untouchable tribal chief the world had come to know. This was a man carrying ghosts on his shoulders. For months, the foundation of the bloodline had been cracking. Solo Sikoa's loyalty had begun to waver. Paul Heyman's once calculated voice had lost its usual steadiness. The empire Roman had built, once seen as unbreakable, now resembled a haunted kingdom. And the fans, who had followed every chapter of the saga, knew the truth. Every empire eventually falls, and it usually happens from within. As Roman stood in the ring, the audience's chants of "acknowledge me" were still there, but weaker, uncertain. The aura of dominance that once commanded fear was fading. Something about tonight felt different. This wasn't just another defense of his championship or another show of strength. This felt like the beginning of something, or perhaps the return of something long buried. The lights suddenly flickered, not in the way they do for dramatic effect, but with an eerie, deliberate glitch. The sound system popped, cut out, and for a few seconds, the entire stadium fell into confusion. Then came that sound, that unmistakable, slowly rising siren. The voice code that every longtime fan knew by heart.
Sierra. Hotel.
India.
Echo.
Lima. Delta. The Shield. The crowd erupted like the past decade had never happened. It was as if time had folded in on itself, and 2012 had returned. People screamed, cried, and jumped in disbelief. But while the fans celebrated, Roman's reaction was the complete opposite. His expression wasn't one of nostalgia, it was horror. He knew exactly what that sound meant. Dean Ambrose was not supposed to exist in this world anymore. Dean had left WWE years ago, leaving behind only bitterness and scars. He had been the lunatic, the fearless soul who gave everything for a brotherhood that had promised to be unbreakable, and then betrayed him. Roman's transformation into the tribal chief wasn't just a storyline to Dean. It was a symbol of betrayal, of a brotherhood poisoned by power and ego. And now, that ghost had returned. The cameras scrambled to locate the source of the commotion until they found him, Dean Ambrose, stepping out from the crowd in a black vest and half-drawn hoodie, his face a portrait of both rage and relief. The roar from the fans was deafening. Even those too young to remember the Shield's glory days screamed like they were witnessing a myth come to life. Dean didn't speak. He didn't need to. His glare said everything. Roman stood frozen in the ring, staring back. The two men locked eyes. Two brothers who had once bled together, now separated by years of pain and betrayal. Dean smirked, but it wasn't the wild, carefree grin fans remembered. It was darker, scarred, heavy with unspoken pain. He pointed to Roman's chest, right where the Shield emblem used to be, and mouthed something inaudible. Roman took a step forward, his jaw clenched. Before he could speak, another familiar sound shook the arena, Seth Rollins' music. The noise level doubled. The crowd lost its collective mind. Now, three men stood in the same ring again for the first time in nearly 10 years. Once brothers, now fractured echoes of what they used to be. But this wasn't a feel-good reunion. This was war. Seth climbed into the ring, the world heavyweight title draped over his shoulder. His grin faded when his eyes met Dean's. The weight of years, of betrayal, of everything unsaid, hung between them. Roman finally broke the silence. Why now? Dean tilted his head, his voice low and sharp. You already know why. Seth stepped closer, anger rising. You think you can just walk back in after everything? After you left us too. You left me. Dean shouted, cutting him off. The words hit like a thunderclap. The crowd fell silent. Roman's face hardened. Dean's voice shook with anger. You both moved on. You became the tribal chief. You became the visionary. And me? I was bleeding in bingo halls, fighting just to feel alive. While you two climbed ladders built on our brotherhood, I was scraping for pieces of what we used to be. The emotion in his voice wasn't performance. It was real. You could feel it bleeding through every syllable. Roman's response was measured but cold. We did what we had to do. Dean scoffed. No, you did what was good for business. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Even Seth seemed unsure which side to take. Before anyone could say another word, the Bloodline's theme hit. Solo Sikoa and Jacob Fatu stormed down the ramp, eyes burning. Paul Heyman trailed behind, shouting for control. Roman raised his hand, demanding they stop, but Solo wasn't listening. He pointed at Dean, yelling, "He doesn't belong here." Dean laughed, a harsh, cracked laugh. Funny. That's what they said about me 10 years ago. Solo slid into the ring, fists clenched, ready for war. Dean calmly tossed aside his hoodie, revealing a brand new tactical vest with a redesigned shield emblem. Darker, sharper, more sinister. The crowd went ballistic. Seth's eyes widened. Roman looked like he'd seen a ghost. Dean's voice was almost a growl when he spoke again. You built your empire on my blood. Now it's time I burn it down. Solo charged. But before he could land a hit, Seth superkicked him clean out of nowhere. The crowd erupted. Roman shouted, "What are you doing?" Seth didn't respond. He looked between Dean and Roman and said almost quietly, "Maybe it's time the real brothers came home." The explosion of noise was indescribable. Fans were losing control, some jumping barricades. For the first time in years, the Shield was back, but this wasn't about justice. This was about vengeance. The Bloodline's dominance was crumbling before the world's eyes. Solo and Jacob stormed the ring, but the three brothers stood side by side once again. The clash was instant. Dean fought with pure, unrestrained fury, like a man possessed. Seth's precision and speed were unmatched as he took down Jacob with a flying knee. Roman, finally letting go, speared Solo with enough force to shake the ring. The crowd thundered with chants of "This is awesome," over and over. Security poured in to stop them, but chaos ruled. Dean smashed a chair into one of the guards, Seth hurled the timekeeper's table, and Roman demolished anyone who came close. The Shield was reborn in violence, not justice. Backstage, the entire locker room was in chaos. Triple H was seen screaming into his headset, "Keep the cameras rolling. Don't cut," because he knew this moment would rewrite history. Back in the ring, Dean stood atop the announce table, breathing heavily, looking down at Roman. "You wanted a kingdom?" he yelled. "We're here to take it back." Roman stared up, fury and exhaustion in his eyes. "You think this is your story, Dean? This is my world now." Dean dove off the table, tackling Roman to the ground, punches flying. Seth tried to separate them, but his own rage boiled over. Years of resentment exploded out of him. "You think either of you are the leader? I carried the Shield. I carried W.